Good morning and welcome to our webinar, Effectively Managing High Volume Workstreams in-house. Before we begin, we acknowledge and pay our respect to the past, present and emerging traditional custodians and elders of this nation, in particular the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on whose land our Sydney headquarters are based, and the various lands on which those of you who are joining us online today. My name is Alexandra Perry. I am a practice group leader in our commercial and regulatory team at LegalVision, and I'm joined today by my colleague Emmanuel Giuffre, who is the General Manager in Australia, as well as our Head of Legal. Thanks for joining us. Before we begin, we just want to go through some housekeeping. You will receive the slides and a copy of the recording after the presentation. At the end, we will leave some time to answer questions, so please feel free to submit your questions during the presentation and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. And we'd also be really grateful if you could please complete the feedback survey at the end of the webinar. I'll hand over to you, Manny, to speak a little bit more about LegalVision and why we're giving this presentation.
Excellent, thanks Ali. And yeah, you can call me Manny, only Ali and my grandmother calls me Emmanuel. So yeah, LegalVision is just a bit of context because I think it's really relevant to the material that we're going to be presenting today. So for those that don't know, LegalVision is a full service commercial law firm. We have about 150 lawyers across Australia, New Zealand and the United Kingdom, and the work that we focus on is really work for really busy in-house legal teams of various sizes and also small to medium-sized businesses. For our enterprise clients, the work that we do is a lot of their very high volume, business as usual legal work. So you'll be hearing us speaking a lot about that, BAU, and what we're referring to there is work that isn't necessarily the most legally risky, might not necessarily be the most legally complex, but it's essential for the proper running of the business, and it's critical to get right. So our team manages a huge volume of work. You know, something like 30,000, 35,000 unique pieces of legal work per annum. And the only way that we can do that work and deliver it in a cost-effective, efficient, and really high-quality manner is to use systems, process, and technology. What we're going to be talking to you today, and happy to move over to the next slide, what we're going to be talking to you today is about how in-house teams might be able to use some of these tools that we employ every day to be able to deliver your BAU work in a really efficient way. So we speak to in-house lawyers daily, and have done so over the past 12 years. That's how long LegalVision has been around. And the challenges have remained relatively consistent, but they are definitely growing in intensity. And the three big ones are increased workload, i.e. in-house lawyers are juggling three different types of work. They're juggling the business critical, really strategic project-based work. They're acting as corporate firefighters, so being really reactive to really urgent pieces of work that might arise. Think things like privacy breaches or employment-related issues or disputes. But also they're managing extremely high volumes of this BAU work. And it could be work like contract reviews, high volumes of employment-related issues, debt recovery. It could be advertising review and compliance, high volume leasing, all that sort of work, which is essential for the business to operate, but it isn't necessarily that complex, not necessarily that interesting, and it's definitely taking them away from that really business critical work. The other two things that in-house teams are struggling with are tighter budgets, that old chestnut needing to do more with less, and it's something that's going to become even more important and more of a pressure in this particular economy as there's more of a focus on productivity. And the third thing is changing and challenging internal stakeholder expectations. Those expectations are largely around in-house teams needing to be more commercial, needing to be more strategic, and also being able to deliver on this increased workload faster and more affordably. So those are the main challenges. Next slide, thanks Laney. So the goal of today's presentation is really to focus on that BAU work and how you might be able to deliver that work more efficiently, more cost effectively, and in a legally prudent manner to make sure that you are properly mitigating risk, and you're mitigating it so it's appropriate for the type of work that you are dealing with. The solutions that we're going to present are not necessarily going to focus on the tech, because we know that not all in-house teams are going to be able to afford it, nor is it appropriate. But what we're really going to be focusing on is sort of simple, practical, really tested strategies that we know are going to be able to help you better manage that BAU work, things that you can basically do from tomorrow. So next slide. So part one, and happy to move on to the next slide as well. Before you move on to a transformation project, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about a legal transformation project. You need to be able to get really clear on what your target is. When I refer to legal transformation, and I don't love the term because it's very Silicon Valley, it can be a little bit pretentious. What I'm referring to is looking at a particular work stream or the way you are delivering the work, considering whether it's conventional, you've always done it in that particular way, but whether you can deploy maybe systems or processes, tech, or maybe even just slightly tweaking the way that you're delivering it so that you can do it more efficiently, more effectively, and more cost effectively, and potentially increasing the quality. So that's what I mean by legal transformation. So the first step is to get really, really clear on what it is that your team is spending its time on. And in order to do that, you need to make sure that you are using data. It is so important before embarking on any legal transformation journey that you are collecting information, you're collecting the right type of information, and that you have enough of it to make a really informed decision. So what we're really talking about here is matter management tools. There are plenty out there. So there are tech platforms like Zapier or LawView that are great at doing this particular, at collecting data and helping you manage your matters. But you can also use a spreadsheet. And I know that a lot of particularly smaller in-house teams, possibly in-house teams that aren't as technologically mature, they're using spreadsheets and it works perfectly fine. It's important that you're also collecting the right type of information. As a minimum, you should be focusing on the type of work, so getting really clear on categorizing and labeling the different types of work streams that are coming into your team. Number two, getting really clear on the amount of time that you are spending on each piece of work. Whenever I mention that, lawyers recoil because they think, oh God, does that mean I have to do timesheets? No, you don't. The lawyers here at LegalVision don't do timesheets. What we do is instead focus on estimated effort. So the lawyer's giving us an estimated, indication of how much time or effort they've spent on a particular matter. So yeah, the type, the amount of time spent, the volume of that particular work that's coming into the team. If you have that data, you'll have a really good estimate of the cost, so the cost to service or to deliver that particular product, and where it's coming from. So those are really so from which departments that work is coming from. So those should be the core of the information that you're collecting. And then if you have, if you've got the time to be able to do this, it'd be good also to be able to get some information as to the business criticality and the strategic importance or even the legal risk involved in that particular work stream. So that's the type of data you should be collecting. Really, the important thing is that you are being rigorous and consistent with your collection of data and incorporating it into your processes. Now, once you have enough data, that's when you can go and start evaluating and analyzing it. Again, I know that not all lawyers are fans of data. Images of Excel spreadsheets come to mind, and we are fundamentally creatures of Microsoft Word. So don't be afraid to rely on outside support to be able to help you in really evaluating that data or putting it at least in a form so that you can extract real meaning from. And what you're looking for in terms of meaningful insights are trends, looking for particular pain points, or in effect just looking at what are the work streams that your team are just spending an inordinate amount of time on and could be the target for your transformation project. Thanks, Lainey. Next slide. So once you understand the different types of work that is coming into your team, now it's time for you to go through a workflow mapping exercise. LegalVision does that whenever we embark on a transformation team for a particular practice area. We'll have a look at what the team is spending their time on and identify, okay, well, what are the work streams that are ripe for transformation? We map everything on, as you can see, this quadrant or this matrix. And the key determinants that we use are input and opportunity. By input, it's a really broad catch-all term that is used to describe things like complexity, specialization, the number of lawyer hours, basically all of the resources that are required to complete that particular task. In effect, for LegalVision, it's really about the cost to serve. And then when we have a look at opportunity, we're looking at, okay, and this is more of a subjective analysis. It's subjectively, do we believe that that particular type of work can be delivered more efficiently or cost effectively, or can we provide a better client experience, which is ultimately the most important thing for us and to in-house teams? Can we provide a better client experience by doing it slightly differently? You can use whatever quadrants you like. It'll really change depending on the business and your particular legal function. It'll also really hinge upon what's important to you. So when we do this exercise with clients, some of them prefer legal complexity versus repeatability. Others might think about legal risk versus repeatability. The most important thing is that there is at least one determinant, one axis which deals with that subjective element. Can it be done better? Next slide, thanks, Lainey. The next thing that your team should really be interrogating is whether you are focusing on the most impactful work. In-house teams definitely fall within the trap of trying to handle everything. They try to do absolutely everything. Whereas what you need to be doing is retaining the work that absolutely must be done by your team. And generally speaking, that work will be things that are business critical. They are strategic. They are value adding. They sometimes require really deep business institutional knowledge that only you possess, and which it would just be too difficult or time consuming to refer out. It might also require extensive stakeholder input or collaboration. There's lots of different things that go into that, but you need to ask the question, does the work need to be done by you? Alternatively, can you refer that work out? If it doesn't need to be done by you, do you have strategic external legal partner relationships that you might be able to refer that work out to? I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by strategic external legal partners a bit later, but basically it's external law firms. And then finally, think about, and this is really, really critical, what work could potentially be done or self-serviced or self-helped by your business stakeholders. So when you're looking at your data and you're finding out where it's coming from, can some of those departments self-service some of that legal work? And generally speaking, it'll be that quadrant 4 work that I was talking about. So the work that is relatively low complexity, low input, but high repeatability, high opportunity for transformation. That's the sort of work that could be serviced potentially by your in-house team, in part or in full, depending on your risk profile. But in order to do that, you need to educate the business, you need to have self-service tools, self-help tools, and you really need to lay the foundations to ensure that legal risk is managed in a prudent manner. Next slide. Here is an example of this process that we've done for a client previously. So we analysed their data, we identified some trends, we worked with them to collate feedback, and then we went and mapped a lot of the work that they were doing on our quadrants. They then went through a process of asking the question, does the work need to be done by them? And they thought about, okay, what was the type of work that we could refer out to our strategic legal partner, or the work that we could empower the business to be able to self-service. And then they identified their targets. And unsurprisingly, the targets that they chose were in those quadrants 3 and 4, so high opportunity for transformation. It was also the work that you can see that the majority of the transformation projects fell within that Q4 because they were the quickest win opportunities, because it was less complex work and highly repeatable. Things like standard contract reviews, standard contract negotiations, handling customer claims. For this particular client, it was a lot about warranty and ACL claims coming through. How could the business self-service those? Marketing collateral reviews as well. A really high volume of marketing collateral reviews, making sure that the claims made were compliant with the Australian consumer law. So yeah, this is, I suppose, a bit of a snapshot of what it could look like for you undergoing this evaluation process. And now we'll move on to the next part, which is Ali, for tips, tricks, tools, all the rest of it.
Cool. Thanks, Manny. So once you've mapped out your work streams and you've identified your targets for transformation, how do you actually transform or improve those targets? In this part of the presentation, we're hoping to provide you with some tips, tricks, and importantly, tools to be able to do this. The tools that we're going to run through are simple, they're cost effective, and they don't require fancy tech. But in order for them to be useful to you, you do really need to do that diagnostic data collation that Manny has spoken to. With the right data and the right processes in place for collecting the data, you can develop capabilities of your legal team as well as your non-legal team, and you can also develop a framework for ensuring that you continue to capture, manage, and share and apply the knowledge and know-how that your team has. So if you don't have precedents already, then the first thing you need to do is to invest in developing some. Next slide, please, Lainey. With the data that you've already collected, you will know which documents you use the most, and therefore you can spend time in developing and creating the precedents that will be most effective and most utilised by your team. Once you have precedents in place, or if you already have them in place, you need to refine them so that they're actually efficient. A precedent with complex clauses and lots of legal jargon isn't super helpful, and I probably should add at this point that previously negotiated contracts aren't precedents and shouldn't be relied on as such. If you can simplify your precedents, then they're easier for your internal stakeholders to use, and they also reduces time in drafting and negotiating the contracts. Once you've got your precedents refined, put in place some systems to ensure that they're actually used and they're used appropriately. So this will require some education of the business and the legal team. You also need to have put in place a system to ensure that they're maintained and they're kept up to date. We recommend doing this sort of every 12 months. It's better to do smaller changes more regularly than to leave it every 2 or 5 years and have to do a complete overhaul of your precedents. Once all your systems are in place, you can then start to look at things like document automation to optimize your precedents further. But in our view, there's no real point in looking at things like document automation or other similar tools if you don't have really solid precedents in place to begin with. It's sort of like putting the cart before the horse. The next transformation tool is one of my favorites. It's playbooks. Now, it's not something you hear of a lot, especially in the traditional law firm environment. Essentially, a playbook is a legally approved guide which sets out your standardized strategies, clauses, and responses to use during negotiations. It's a relatively inexpensive tool, but it can significantly streamline contract negotiations and improve negotiation outcomes. It is a useful tool for both legal and non-legal team members, and it can help empower your non-legal team members to actually engage in lower complexity, lower value contract negotiations, which gives you time to then focus on the more business critical projects. In order to pull your playbooks together, start by reviewing your standard form contracts and identifying the most negotiated clauses. Then set out what your standard base position would be, what your first compromise position is, and then finally what your fallback position or perhaps what the market standard position is. So an example of what a playbook might look like, or at least an extract from the playbook, is on the following slide. Often they're in a table form, so you can see here there's an issue, which is indemnities given to third parties. There's an explanation of what this the position is taken by this organization, what their standard position would be, fallback position, and then what their final position here. And in the situation, there's no final fallback position. So this is quite an important key risk for this organization. The next tool is knowledge banks. Now, this is sort of an umbrella term really for all your banks of legally approved template advices, clauses, and other communications that you can use in the legal team and also in your non-legal team. It's a way of capturing knowledge, empowering your team, improving efficiencies, and also minimizing risk long-term as well. To create your knowledge banks, you need to rigorously capture the data, as we've talked about before, and you need to do it in a uniform way. You need to categorize or tag the knowledge bank or the information that is being fed into your knowledge bank. For example, if you had an advice bank, you may have categories of employment advice, privacy advice, Australian consumer law advice, and then you could go a level deeper with subcategories, which may be in a privacy advice setting, data breach responses, or when consent is required to collect information, and so on. Instead of having subcategories, you could also have tags or labels. It really depends on how you're cataloging the information. Now, there are third-party tools that you can use to help catalog and capture knowledge. However, you can simply do it through an Excel spreadsheet or through Google Docs or Word. Once you've got your knowledge bank sorted, it's important to actually make use of it and ensure that it's part of the delivery process. Now, part of this will be, educating your stakeholders around its usage, and then other parts of it will be ensuring that it's integrated into, say, your triage or, delivery process, which we will come to triage processes in a minute. On the next slide, we actually have a screenshot from a clause bank. So this is an example of what you might see in a clause bank. Here, there are two disputes clauses. One is tagged as being a short form, one is tagged as being long form and used with overseas contractors or overseas third parties. There's a simple description and definitions, and all this information is really intended to help the user know when and how to use each of these clauses. Cheat sheets are essentially guidance notes on a particular legal issue or type of contract review. Again, they're used to educate and upskill both legal and non-legal team members, and they can also be used as part of the triage process as well once they've been legally approved. Creating cheat sheets shouldn't necessarily take up a lot of time or research, because if you have the knowledge bank and if you've been collecting knowledge and the data along the way, it should be easy to utilize that knowledge to create the cheat sheets on a particular issue. Then you can use them as a first point of call for either your legal team, your juniors, or your non-legal team members. For example, you could have things to look for in an NDA review, or things to look out for when you're dealing with warranty claims or customer complaints. So you could have a series of pre-approved statements that your customer success team can use when they're speaking to customers about a complaint. And the cheat sheet could also include some rationale and some of the reasoning for those statements. So you're educating your internal stakeholders as you go. On the next slide is a sample cheat sheet. So this is a sample cheat sheet for reviewing NDAs. You can see there's the issue and then the explanation to the side of that. Now, depending on the risk profile of your business and what your execution and governance policies are, having these cheat sheets in place isn't about shifting or removing your responsibility in its entirety. It's really about empowering your junior lawyers, empowering your internal team, non-legal team members to self-serve and then go through the appropriate sign-off pathways as well. And this is an example of, or an extract from a regulatory cheat sheet. This would be, for example, determining when you need a permit for a trade promotion in the different states and territories. Now, this is just an extract, so the cheat sheet goes on to go through each of the different states and territories and when a permit might be required. As senior in-house counsel or as general counsels, you want to be spending time on the most impactful work. And in order to do so and to benefit from the other transformation tools that we've spoken about, we recommend putting in place an escalation process or multiple escalation processes. These are also just part of good risk management anyway, so it's worth doing. This is an example of an escalation pathway, and it's for when you're reviewing a contract. Things to consider are, is the contract standard form? What is the total contract value, the TCV? Is it below a certain amount? What's your risk threshold? If it's a dispute, what is the value of the dispute? Is it business critical? Is it particularly sensitive or risky? And finally, do you have knowledge resources and playbooks in place in order to be able to help your internal team members self-serve, with, of course, the appropriate legal sign-off. The last transformation tool that we're going to speak about is strategic partnerships, and I'll hand back over to Manny to speak to this.
Thanks, Ali. One thing that I would also add, so the first few tools that Ali was talking about, so precedents, playbooks, cheat sheets, knowledge banks, all of those things are designed to really pull the knowledge from you, the legal expert, but also the people in your team, so that you can also amplify that knowledge. You can amplify your impact. So at LegalVision, we always talk about how do we productize knowledge so that all of the lawyers and all of their experience can be consolidated into tools that can be picked up and used by more junior lawyers or picked up by team members in other teams. And yeah, so we're constantly thinking about how can I consolidate my knowledge so that it can be used by other people, so we can democratize that information. I think only through democratization, through sharing information, through sharing experiences and knowledges, only by doing that can you really transform a work stream. So the last transformation tool that we'd like to talk about is these strategic partnerships. So clearly I'm talking there about external legal providers. And what I mean by strategic is making sure that you have a good diversity of partners. So it could be one or more external law firms who you're engaging to deliver most effectively the work streams. So remember, going back to those earlier slides, what your team should be focusing on is the most impactful work. So the most business critical, the most strategic, the work that needs to be done by you. And then through the analysis process, you should also identify work streams that could more effectively be delivered by one of these strategic partners. And it could be because you are leveraging their expertise. So it could be a great law firm that you know can handle disputes really well. Or it could be because you know that they've got a really great tax partner, or you know that they can handle an IPO because they've got that level of experience and expertise. But it could also be because you know that they've got great systems and processes and technology to handle work streams that you can't handle internally as effectively. So, for example, a lot of law firms will come to us because they know that we can handle high volume stream leasing very well, or because they know that we can handle their high volume customer and supplier contracts far more efficiently and far more effectively than they can handle internally. So it's really about leveraging the resources of your partner the most strategically and intelligently. So considerations, make sure that you've got diversification amongst your partners so that you're using the right tool for the job. There's no point in, for example, providing a high volume, if you've got a high volume of NDAs, there's no point in referring that to a top tier law firm that will charge you on an hourly rate basis. You should look for an external partner that can manage that volume more cost effectively. You should also focus on finding you're partnering with an external law firm that really aligns with your values. So they understand your business, they understand the way that you like to work, They understand your legal and commercial risk profile, and also they are happy to tailor the solution so that it suits you. So finding alignment is so important. And part of finding alignment is also finding a billing model that works for you. I'm telling our clients all the time, who use LegalVision but also have a variety of other partners that they're using for their legal work. Don't accept hourly rate as the norm. So start thinking about, okay, what are the alternative billing models that works better for you? So looking at fixed fee arrangements, having a look at retainer and subscription arrangements, having a look at capped hourly rates, or a combination of all of those options. And also paneling arrangements is also very useful to manage your strategic partnerships. So over to the next slide. Shameless, not so shameless plug. So LegalVision does have a managed service solution that has been designed specifically for in-house legal teams. So large all the way through to small in-house legal teams, where we can assist them with their business as usual legal work. We are currently servicing, we've got multiple clients, multinational organisations with a presence in Australia through to very large Australian businesses with very large in-house teams, and all the way through to smaller, in-house teams with only one lawyer. So the solution was really designed with the in-house lawyer in mind to be able to take that BAU work off their plate and be able to manage it really effectively. So our lawyers are always using systems, process, technology, things like automation tools, as well as all the tools that Ali has spoken to you about in order to manage that work stream. And the type of work that in-house lawyers are sending us are things like their high volume customer contracts, high volume supplier contracts, debt recovery matters, high volume leasing, advertising review and compliance, employment and HR. So even privacy and compliance, ACL compliance. So there's just a lot of different work streams that we are able to support businesses in more effectively because we have invested in those systems and processes over time. And the good thing is that we also can go through the process with the client and identify, okay, well, what is the solution that will work best for you and tailor it for their specific needs. So if you're interested in a desk extension, please feel free to reach out. If you're interested in finding out more, you can either submit a question in the comments or feel free to book in a consult with Ali and I. We would love to talk to you about the desk extension solution and how it might be able to work for you. Similarly, if you are looking to undergo a legal transformation project within your team and you don't know where to start, feel free to reach out because we would happily be able to talk you through some of these strategies and also help you through that evaluation process.
So that brings us to the end of the substantive part of this presentation. Do feel free to submit any questions that you have and we'll answer them in a couple of minutes. We have a general counsel toolkit, which is free to download, and you can use the QR code here. A lot of the tools we've discussed today are spoken about in that general counsel toolkit. And we have lots more webinars coming up for in-house counsel, but the next one is on privacy law reform and how the proposed changes will affect in-house counsel's obligations. That's next Thursday. So over to the Q&A. Looks like one thing we haven't discussed, but there's a question here on is in relation to AI and how to adopt AI. Look, that is a topic in and of itself, and hopefully one that we will be speaking about soon. However, I suppose as a preliminary view, I would encourage you to take a really curious approach to AI and generative AI, chatbots, for example, ChatGPT. Of course, there are a lot of limitations and things you need to be mindful of, like privacy and confidentiality and accuracy of the chatbots, but they can be really effective, and they can certainly streamline and make certain processes a lot more efficient, particularly things like comms and communications to your internal team. It's something that we trial a lot at LegalVision. There are different models. There are some, I think the most recent version of ChatGPT actually does have privacy protections in place, so you can put certain sensitive information in there. Do you have any thoughts on AI, Manny?
Yeah, well, look, I'm excited by AI. I think a lot of the legal industry is looking at it precariously and wondering what will AI do to the future of the legal profession. But I know that for myself, and I know that a lot of in-house lawyers are really excited by the potential of what generative AI can do and large language models can do to be able to make our jobs and make our lives easier and be able to deliver more value to the business or more value to our clients for less. So there's so much opportunity there. I completely agree with what you were talking about, Ali. I mean, you need to look at it curiously but cautiously. At the moment, the technology is just not there yet. So, we've got a very large working group at LegalVision, plus a very large team of developers who are using these models regularly and testing them out. So we're testing about 4 or 5 different models at the moment, OpenAI being one of them, Claude, the Google model, all the rest of it. And what we're finding is that some of the models are really quite good at certain things, but the models are still they are still just making up stuff, and really inadequate in others. So it's certainly not there yet to be able to deliver really good quality legal advice or legal services, but it's just moving so quickly. And so it's really important, I think, for in-house teams when thinking about adopting this technology to treat it cautiously, being really mindful about privacy risks, being really mindful about integration and security risks. But keep playing around and testing it, because there are some use cases that you might find are really helpful. Things like summarizing meetings and things like being able to draft clauses, that you might need to tinker with, or being able to do a first cut of a piece of advice, or being able to, like you were saying, Ali, rewording communications. All of those things might be able to save you and your team time, but I probably wouldn't be relying on it just yet to review contracts or to prepare, review contracts, or the other thing that I was thinking of was
prepare legal advice.
Yeah, of course, yeah, without it being reviewed. So I mean, look, it's a really exciting time. And the other thing and I suppose this is an important thing to talk about technology generally. In-house teams really need to think about whether they need to be investing in this technology at all. I know that the bigger the legal team gets, the more technologically mature it makes sense for them to be. But what you could also do, if you don't necessarily have the budget or you don't have the business case right now to invest in technology tools, then just leverage the IP, leverage the investment of law firms who have gone through that process, who do have all of those capabilities, and you get the benefit of that through, I suppose, more efficient and more cost-effective legal services, right? So, and I suppose this goes back to my point around strategic partnerships. So leverage the IP of those firms that have made the investment. Yeah. Any other questions?
Doesn't look like we've got any other questions at this stage. So I'll give people another minute, but in the meantime, we'll start wrapping up. As Manny said, we would love to speak to you. So if you would like to have a chat about our desk extension or even potential transformation projects, please feel free to book in a call with us. You can leave your contact details after the webinar when you complete the survey. We'd love to hear from you.
And one thing,
Otherwise,
we do speak to in-house lawyers quite a lot, and one thing that I'm always interested in, well, firstly, they would love to have more webinars, more opportunities to get their CPD points, particularly this time of year. I'd love to know, and Ali would love to know, what are the types of webinars that you would like to hear from us on? Did you find this useful? And would you like more practice management or legal ops style webinars like this, or would you prefer more substantive law content? Yeah, please let us know. We're very keen for feedback, and we're more than keen to deliver.
yeah, totally. Thank you. All right, thanks everyone for joining, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Thanks, guys.